Tonight, more fallout from Obama's controversial speech about his former pastor. Does Jeremiah Wright believe in what's called a black liberation theology? And just how radical is that school of thought? Well, hello, America. After Barack Obama's speech yesterday on the racially charged anti-American comments of his former pastor Jeremiah Wright, the liberal media held a pity party. Oh, poor Barack. He's just got a crazy grandpa, and don't we all have a crazy grandpa? No. Here's the point tonight. Reverend Jeremiah Wright is much more dangerous than any crazy grandpa any of us might have had. The foundation of Wright's beliefs are rooted in the theological tradition based in hate, intolerance, and racial black nationalism. Here's how I got there. I told you just last week that I wouldn't give any platform to any slinging of any mud for any candidate or any party, and I feel I am keeping my word on this. I am not piling on Obama due to the comments of his former pastor. What I'm doing, and what I think is important that we all do, is shine a light on Barack's past. We don't know really who this guy is. We have to kind of piece it together, not only by what he says in the present, but what he has done in the past. Who is Barack Obama? Who has built his foundation? So what did Barack do in the last 20 years? Well, he's, one thing, sat in the one of the pews of the Trinity United Church of Christ and listened to Reverend Jeremiah Wright's sermons. He says he counts Wright as a member of his family and his senior spiritual advisor. Okay, if that's true, then I think it's fair that we find out who Wright is and what he believes. In the talking points page of the Trinity Church's website, Reverend Wright, in his own words, states that the foundation of his beliefs are in systemized black liberation theology and praises James Cone's book, Black Power and Black Theology. This is what James Cone, the man who Obama's senior spiritual advisor looks up to and whose ideas he preaches, states as black liberation theology. Listen carefully and please follow along. Quote, black theology refuses to accept a God who is not identified totally with the goals of the black community. If God is not for us and against white people, then he is a murderer, and we had better kill him. The task of black theology is to kill gods who do not belong to the black community. Black theology will accept only the love of God, which participates in the destruction of the white enemy. What we need is the divine love as expressed in black power, which is the power of black people to destroy their oppressors here and now by any means at their disposal. Unless God is participating in this holy activity, we must reject his love. Wow, America, here is what you need to know tonight. The man who wrote those words contributed to the foundation of Reverend Jeremiah Wright's ministry. Barack Obama has been fed a steady diet of those teaching for 20 years. He sat in the pew every Sunday, soaking it in. He never denounced or rejected the Reverend's beliefs until it was politically advantageous. So, do we believe 20 years of evidence or a 20-minute speech? Forget about me. I want to ask you the question. Is this the kind of man that you want to have access to the most powerful man on earth? Ken Blackwell is a senior fellow for family empowerment at the Family Research Council, and Ramesh Ponnuru is the Time columnist and senior editor for the National Review. Ramesh, let me start with you. Newsweek called a couple of dozen prominent African-American pastors and asked them how out of step is Jeremiah Wright with what they see coming across the country. What did they find?
Well, they found that not one of their experts was willing to say that the Reverend Wright had crossed any kind of significant line. They were saying that this sort of stuff is firmly within the mainstream of the churches that they're talking about. Okay, not that all churches are like this, but that a lot were. Okay,
here's what I don't understand, Ramesh, is I'm reading the editorials. I read 4 papers today. You can't find an editorial in a mainstream paper today that says anything but that Barack Obama was brave, etc., etc. This is poison. This would destroy anybody else's career. How is this just being dismissed?
Well, partly it's because for some of his fans and among liberals and in the press, Barack Obama can't sneeze without it being called eloquent. Partly it's because he managed very skillfully to change the subject. The question you've been talking about, I think, is the right question, which is, what does his association, his tight and long-standing association with the Reverend Wright, say about him, his beliefs, and his judgment? Instead, he made it all about this grand canvas of race relations in this country. So it's not about his judgment, it's about all of us.
Okay.
The moral test is of us, not of him.
Ken, I wanted to have you on because you are a former UN ambassador, U.S. ambassador at the UN, and you have seen this black liberation philosophy or theology before. Explain, and I think this is even more frightening than the stuff that I've already read on television. Explain what you've seen.
Well, essentially, liberation theology took root in Africa and Central America. It was often offered up by Marxist regimes that knew that they couldn't uproot the church, so they tried to weaken the doctrine of the church. So it is an alternative doctrine of the church that embraces big government. It advances a collectivist ideal and idea, and it says the state, not the individual, is central to society. And that is very disquieting, but it also gives you a better understanding of the undergirding of Senator Obama's big government, liberal philosophy that would increase spending, increase taxes, weaken our military, and our position in the world.
I tell you, it explains the comments of his wife. It explains, you're exactly right, his big government ideas. If you understand what this theology is, you do begin to understand Barack Obama, but it is I believe, in a frightening way. However, I'm being labeled the one that's the hate monger for asking these questions. How is this theology out there and it not be labeled racist and hate monger?
It's part of a series of parts. You know, here's a guy who says that he studied the doctrine of Saul Alinsky, who was an anarchist, a radical. Here's a guy who basically said that while he was in Reverend Wright's church, he embraces Louis Farrakhan. The fact is that nobody has elevated this beyond his race. He can speak eloquently on race and moving towards a color-blind society, but what he can't speak to is how he got there, going to a color-conscious theology, and how he got there by embracing, I think, a position that was really radical and antithetical to this whole notion of God as being central to our nation and the individual as being primary.
Ramesh, do you think, if I had a gun to your head and made you make a prediction, lay your last $1,000 on the table and make a bet, does this just tighten Barack Obama's core and I think tear us apart even more, make us, you know, pretty much guarantee 1968, or does this does he get away with it? Does it mean anything to anybody in the end?
I think Obama, you know, we've heard a lot of people say, oh, he threaded the needle, and that's true except for one factor. He may be getting through the primaries this way, but unfortunately there's also a general election, and I'm not sure that this kind of double talk where he sort of says he's not excusing the Reverend Wright in his anti-American comments and then gives 7 paragraphs of excuses for it is going to work with the general electorate.
Gosh,
I think liberals are fooling themselves.
I have to tell you, I have more respect for Democrats in this. I don't think Democrats are in line with Reverend Wright at all. Ken, Ramesh, thank you very much.